Well, actually, it was quite a personal decision, I would say. So I studied at IIT Delhi, and I have been an engineer for almost all my corporate life, and working in companies like Intel, Nvidia, and Freescale Semiconductors. I was just figuring out, what's next in terms of my career, and that's when one of the first thoughts that came into my mind was maybe I should do an MBA, right? I mean, many of my peers were going and doing MBAs, either in India or from some country like a US or Europe. And then another alternative idea was, just do something of my own. I figured out, like starting up was actually quite cheaper compared to doing an MBA. And, essentially that's how I started, because I was anyway a techie, though I didn't actually work on software part of it. But I believe that I had the skills to, do that. And then, the job wasn't really very exciting for me, when I was there at Freescale Semiconductors. I was well paid, but not satisfied at all in terms of, where my career was going. And then while I was doing research on different things on what I can do, I definitely figured out that hardware is something that we can't do in India. I mean, the ecosystem just doesn't exist. But then, while doing some research, I came across some reports which said that, okay, India has these large number of percentage of people who are using mobile phones, and they're all prepaid. Now, the question that came to my mind was, how do people pay for this, right? How do they put money into the prepaid mobile phone? And then I discovered that, like almost everybody just went to a nearby shop and did it. And that to me sounded a bit illogical, because, we had already seen the likes of Make My Trip, Yatra, etc., where you could go and, buy tickets, rail tickets or air tickets, or things for travel, services for travel online. And this seemed like something, which you should be buying online. You shouldn't be going to a shop. And what do you do if your phone runs out of balance, let's say 8 p.m. in the night, right? So that was the sort of original idea, with which I started. And of course, that idea, changed quite a bit, today in terms of what we do. But the essence of the idea was very simple, which was that, you use internet. And at that time, there were no smartphones. There was primarily only web. You go to the web, you create a wallet where you can put up money, let's say 500 rupees or 1,000 rupees. And then you can use that money to make small payments like, recharge your phone, pay for your cable TV, pay for your bills. And gradually we expanded the scope of services that you could pay for. In between, we also applied for a license and got a license from Reserve Bank of India to run this wallet in 2013. So essentially, it arose from a personal need, because I was myself also a prepaid user, and my mom was a prepaid user as well. So I thought that maybe, let's make a website where we could do this online. I actually did. I actually wanted to figure out how the business model works for a retailer who actually sells these cards, prepaid cards or scratch cards. At that time, there used to be scratch cards, and then also the e-top up in a store. What are the economics of that? And who all are involved? So I actually went and spoke to some of the retailers who were near my residence. I also went and spoke to some distributors who used to distribute this prepaid top up to these retailers. And also actually then went to the largest telco, which was Airtel, and tried to understand from them what do they think of this and how do they treat this business. Then I sort of got an understanding of what the economies involved are, what are the margins involved are, and I thought that maybe this would work, and if we could do it properly in terms of large number of users, because the market itself was very big. I think the one thing that convinced me was that though this was a low margin business, the market that was available for this was almost all of India, because at that time it was only 90% prepaid, but now we are at 97% prepaid. And at that time, one of the some feedback I got from, let's say, some of the investors was that, okay, maybe only people who are on the street, or who are driving a rickshaw or something like that. So there is a certain category of people who are only prepaid, which I didn't believe, because if 97% people in India are using prepaid, then it has to include people in urban India as well. So, after doing this research and talking to a lot of people, I was convinced, based on market size, and that this is the sort of right idea to start with. Just to put that in context, I'm the eldest son in the family, and I don't come from any kind of a privileged background, and in fact, I supported my family for the first 6 to 7 years while I was in a job. So this actually came across as a big shock to my family, especially my mother. And she was like, "Are you crazy? I mean, you studied at IIT and you have this great job. You're getting, lakhs of salary every month. Why would you quit that and try to get into, and especially when you don't have a lot of savings or a capital to start a business? Why would you do something like this? I mean, it's absolutely crazy." And I think when I look back at it, it does sound crazy, right? Today it doesn't, but at that time, if I look back at that right now, it was crazy. But I think, what, so I think entrepreneurs need to be crazy in some sense, that you have to basically believe in what you are doing and have the conviction, and of course be able to handle the criticism and the social pressures as well. Even, not only my immediate family, but even people outside, like the relatives or the friends. I remember asking one friend, if he wanted to invest in this business. And I knew he was a rich guy. He said that this is not going to work, right? And it's not that I can give you money, but this is not going to work. It's not going to. And he recently congratulated me when we completed our $25 million fundraise. So I think ultimately it's you have to believe in yourself. But I think I also think that you need to have some other people as well who believe in your idea. These could be partners. This could be even your wife. This could be your girlfriend. This could be your boyfriend. This could be the first level of employees that you hire, or your co-founders, because that actually helps you, to get the support which you need in order to ride through the early years, which are always tough. And for me, especially, the case was that Upasna Taku, who's currently my wife. At that time, she was my girlfriend, and we were dating, and she was the one actually who supported me a lot in this decision, and said that if you want to do it, let's just do it, right? I mean, of course, she wasn't working with me at that time. She joined me about 9 to 10 months later, but that helped. It played a big role in getting this off the ground.
Yeah.
These days, the funding is, I think, relatively much easier. When I started in 2009, we didn't have that much of a startup culture or that much of a startup environment. So I had some little bit of savings from my working years over the 6-7 years that I had worked, but it wasn't a lot. I think the way, at least I survived the first year, was just have it run at a very low, cost before we could hit any kind of revenues. So we did have revenues, but they were very small. The way, at least I have capitalized this business over the 6 years, is that the first 4 years we actually didn't raise any funding, and it's just that we scaled up our costs, and we hired employees, or we moved to office. We initially had run from a flat where we used to live, and we just put tables there, and people would come and work from there. The salaries that we were giving were pretty low, even by the standards of 2009. And by the way, all those people who joined during those times, like 2009, 10, and 11, are still with Mobikwik and working with Mobikwik. So, I think my advice would be that focus on revenue. Funding is just a tool to grow your business. Funding is not the the end all and be all of the business. I mean, these days it gets celebrated quite a bit, but trust me that you can get funding, and you may run the business for some time, but ultimately the business model needs to be sound, and you need to generate revenue. At least in India, that's the case. In India, we are not, at least we are not allowed today as entrepreneurs to build businesses like Facebook, for example, where you can make something which will grow like crazy, and you don't have to monetize for, let's say, first 4 years, 5 years. I think in India you have to focus on revenue from day zero, and if you have revenue traction going, and if you feel that you can accelerate faster because you have little or less competition, and you can capitalize the market by growing faster, then that's the right time or the right sort of moment to raise funding. Just raising funding for the sake of funding isn't, I don't think it's the sort of right thing. If you have revenues which support your business, then why do you want to give away your equity, which is fairly precious, to external investors? So I think mobile payments are the only kind of payments which are going to work in India. I mean, given that internet on PC or internet on broadband has been fairly sort of stable, and has not grown quite a lot in the last few years, at least since I started my company, and all the growth is coming on smartphones. And given that 2G, 3G, and now 4G has come, although there are bandwidth issues, I think those are the channels where people are doing WhatsApp, Facebook, social networking, and so eventually smartphone is the tool or the place where they're going to do commerce. And for commerce to happen on a smartphone, payments need to happen. So I mean, I'm extremely bullish on this. Just to give you a context, today, of all the people who use smartphones or on internet, the number of people who pay electronically in India, is 30 million. And that's the total number of people who pay electronically in India. Whereas the number of people who are on internet is anywhere between 200 to 250 million via their smartphones. So you can imagine, in a country of population 1.1, 1.2 billion, we are talking about 30 million people currently who do payments electronically, whether it is on a PC or on a smartphone. So clearly, I mean, there is a lot of growth that is yet to come. So we are a very unique company. Mobikwik is a very unique company, right? Mobikwik was bootstrapped, had no funding till 2013, end 2013, which is when we raised a very small Series A round. 2011 was the time when Paytm started focusing a lot and started spending a lot, and then there was Free Charge, which got funded by Sequoia, which had raised $4-5 million. So we survived through those times, and today we are here as one of the strong contenders in the mobile payments market. I think what I have learned through this journey is that competition is good. Competition keeps you on your toes. Even if you have competition which has more capital or more resources of any kind, I think it is possible to succeed. Number one or number two is something that gets determined over a longer term. The short-term windows is only what investors look at. But overall, if you can build a business which is valuable in terms of number of transactions, number of users, number of merchants, and have the focus, I think it can be a success story. And that's exactly what's happening with Mobikwik, where we have stuck to our basic premise that we have to make payments successful, and we have now 250 people who just focus on making payments easier. We have far more focus than them, I would say. So we are creating new innovative solutions, like how do we solve for bringing cash into the wallet, right? Like you can go to a nearby retail outlet, or you can go to a nearby bank branch to bring cash into the wallet. So we want to bring mobile payments to the masses, and I think this focus will help us go further ahead. Second thing is that we don't do any commerce, so we don't necessarily compete with our own merchants, and that's another advantage that we have, I think, which will help us in the longer term. So data is something that we have started looking at more formally only very recently, about 9 to 12 months back. Before that, I, being a techie myself, I just used to log into the MySQL databases and find out how the numbers are hourly or monthly or weekly or whatever numbers I wanted. Help me get a pulse of the business. I think data is extremely critical in this fast-moving environment. Data is important to understand who your customer is, how he is behaving, what do the cohorts look like. Basically, if you don't understand your customer, then you are basically playing in the dark, right? Because all the marketing campaigns, all the anything that you want to do, what new product features you should create, they all depend on your understanding of who the customer is and how he or she is behaving. And data is the only way you can do that. Of course, you can have your own gut feeling, but and create features of the product around that. But ultimately, everything gets validated with data. So in data, there are two aspects which are very important. One, which is your data easily accessible to the decision makers? Like if you're creating a startup and if you are the decision maker, are you able to see data which matters immediately? And the second thing is that, do you have the right tools or the right people who can help you do that? And I think both of them are extremely critical. So right now, for example, we are focused on creating this data team, whose only mandate is to just take all the data that's available and put it into a format which is easily accessible and easily consumable by the management. Yeah, absolutely, it has actually. So when we started, a lot of focus was on mobile recharge. Though even at that time we had a closed wallet, so we were one of the earliest, or if not the earliest wallet in India. Our focus has changed in terms of how we understood the consumer, and we wanted to solve for payments not just for recharge but across different use cases like utilities, bill payments, peer-to-peer transfers, and then payments to merchants on their own websites or on their apps. So once we realized that users are keeping money in a wallet in order to pay their monthly bills, we thought that they would want to use the same money wherever they go. Whenever they are ordering a pizza, or whenever they are booking a movie ticket, or whenever they are paying for a cab, they should be able to use the same money, and they could get the same seamless payment experience that they get when they are doing a recharge. So after learning about that, we applied for a license to Reserve Bank of India, and we thought that we will make the wallet successful. There were companies with licenses earlier, but I don't think they focused on this part of making it possible through the internet to create a wallet and pay for different kind of services. And so once we received the license, we kept focusing on that. Now, in fact, the model is still evolving, right? Our primary relationship with the customer is that of payments, that the customer pays for so many different things using his wallet. But now we are thinking, what else can we offer to the merchant, to the customer specifically, which would be valuable to the customer and maybe valuable to somebody else like a merchant. So I think that's something that's an ongoing process which all companies have to go through. Once they validate a particular thesis and establish one part of a business model. Business models for startups, you have to be open to keep changing that and pivoting and trying to understand what the consumer is doing and in what direction you can take your business to make it more valuable. So I think there are two, three, thumb rules for that. One is when you're creating a new feature, you have to answer some specific questions. One of those first questions is specifically that, what does this feature help you with, in terms of, does it help you acquire a new customer? Does it help you get more revenue from an existing customer? Does it help you in retention of an existing customer? And I think that's the sort of customer-centric thinking that is required when you're creating a feature. Just creating features which target, it's a 80-20 rule. If you create features which are relevant for 20% of the population, that is still fine, as long as you know who those 20% people are. And for example, we may enable electricity bill payment for a particular state in this country. Now that state may be a small state, but there are people coming for paying the electricity bill from that state, so you have to provide that service. Now the question that you have to answer for your business is that, where are the customers that you need to target on, and are you doing this for a new acquisition, or are you doing it for new revenue, or are you doing it for retention of existing users? So we have faced, this kind of problem, let's say, related to either the working space, for example. So many startups have great working spaces, and they invest a lot, and especially the funded ones, they are able to invest money in terms of creating a very unique working space with great, expensive machines, and the entire paraphernalia, which makes the working space look very good, and is very pleasant and comfortable. So that's where we have actually we had been bootstrapped for a long time. We actually never used to buy MacBooks, for example. We used to give Windows machines even to the designers and said that you have to do with this. And I don't think that there was anything wrong with that approach, because remember that revenue and cost are the only things that make a startup successful. Revenue minus cost is profit. The way we got to know about that is that as more and more people started joining the company, and there was certain kind of software or hardware that you needed in order to sort of do, for example, design, right, or marketing related work. We started realizing that okay, we need to invest in that. And once we started doing that, then our workspace, which was quite limited and sort of combined together, we figured that that is something which needs more expansion. So this is something that I personally have learned only through direct and indirect feedback from different people who never used to complain, but used to say that okay, maybe a nicer office would be very good, or a better machine would be, or an upgraded machine would be very good. And that's something that eventually we acted upon, and then now in the space of about 2 years we have shifted offices already twice, and now hopefully we do a much better job at it. I think it's very, very important to focus on who you hire, right? If you are a founder, just speak and meet and try to understand the motivations of each and every employee who's going to join your company or is about to join your company, at least up to, let's say, first few hundred employees. The reason I say that is because I think, at least in the internet world, consumer internet world, there is no other advantage that you have over any other company except your people. And they really can make or break the company. Mobikwik is here today because of the early employees that we hired, who just given their everything in order for the company to be successful. They were just so passionate and connected to the cause of the company, and not for salary, and not because they were doing a job, but just they felt, together as a team, as if you're playing. And we were always sort of, bootstrapped and didn't have enough capital. We were always fighting against companies which had far more resources. So it was very, very important for us to get that spirit going, and we did that successfully. It's like David versus Goliath, and I think that spirit and that commitment and passion, if you can get just a few people who have that, it spreads like a virus, right? So it's very important to hire people who display signs of you can't figure out everything in the interview phase itself, but you must try to understand what the motivations of this person is. And we even go to the extent of asking about backgrounds, like how were you like growing up, what does your family look like, what do you do, what do they do, for example, how have you made your life decisions, how have you come to this point where you are talking about joining Mobikwik. So beyond the skills, this part about getting the commitment and the passion for the job is something very, very critical. I think everything else, including money, including business success, including skills, can be learned, right? But this is something which comes ingrained within an individual, and you must hire more people. Founders must hire people like these, in order to make the company successful. So we had achieved a lot of scale, by the time we raised our first round of funding, and we had basically established and validated that at least one part of the business works, and we also had clarity on how the business is going to grow, not just in terms of the momentum, but also in terms of the direction, right? So that when we raised our first round of funding, we had no e-commerce business, for example, in terms of wallet being used on e-commerce apps or e-commerce, companies. But we knew that is something that was exciting, and it could actually result in a lot of growth. And that's when we decided that in order to get into that, we needed to raise money so that we could grow inorganically in terms of trying to create a brand, trying to get the trust of more and more people, as well as to do these kind of merchant tie-ups which were required to make the business successful. And so then it was sort of a natural decision, and we met with a few investors and closed the round. So the current marketing is it's quite comprehensive, but it's a mix of brand, trying to build a brand, and also digital marketing. In digital marketing, it's fairly straightforward, although it is quite comprehensive. In digital marketing, you only do two things. One is to acquire a new customer, and the second is to retain an existing customer, or to get a returning customer to return to your product. So from that point of view, we engage in social in-app marketing, where we try to get more and more app installs through different sources, through search, for example. Early days for us, search was a very, very big supporter in terms of getting new users, because if you do your SEO well on Google, and you identify the right keywords, it can be a great source of free traffic, and that's what happened with us. The same when we launched the apps. So this is in terms of digital. And we also do, of course, discounting and incentives in order for customers to change their behavior or try out new consumption and spend patterns. But I think we started doing that fairly late. In the beginning, all our focus was on just organic, acquisition. Retention is more difficult because retention, is a function of the product, and it's also a function of the competition. And I think great businesses are those who ultimately have very high retention. Because acquiring a customers you can do by spending the money, but then if it's a leaky funnel where you pour water into the tumbler and it just leaks, then it's not of much use. So I think retention can only be built with a lot of product being very solid, and also with communication using, let's say, emails or notifications, especially in the case of apps, so that you can build a relationship with the customer. Now, coming back to the brand part, brand is something that we have never done before this year. And this year we have gone to outdoor media, we have gone to radio, we have now gone to television. But I think we must, as a founder, you must invest in brand when you know that the product is working, right? If you do anything before that, it is, you don't really know if your spends will get converted into real users. Because if the product doesn't work, and if you advertise on TV and people come and use the product and it doesn't work, then it's a loss that it's very difficult to recover from. So when I started the company, I was basically a techie, right? I wrote the code for the first, all the code for the platform, and one thing that I did not understand or know about was distribution. I think so. You can call it marketing as well, but I call it distribution. Figuring out how new users will discover your product and service, especially in the early days, is extremely critical. And the impression that it leaves with those early adopters is what can take the business to the next level. And I think to that part, we figured out, for example, that part was search engine optimization, SEO. We discovered that, okay, a lot of people are going on Google and they're trying to discover how to, for example, pay for a recharge or pay for a bill payment. And so if you did well in SEO, which was free, then users would automatically discover you. So figuring out cheap new distribution channels, whether they are social, whether it is search, or it could be anything else, is one thing that I would have definitely done differently, at least in terms of the focus early on, because we started doing SEO fairly late, like about 2010 onwards. So I spent a year thinking that if you just have a website, people will come and use it, which is not how it works. So I think my advice continues to be the same, that there are two things which are very important if you want to build a big business for your startup. One is figure out the market, right? You have to understand which market you are targeting and if it's big enough. You can also create a lifestyle business, but that's a choice that one must make consciously by figuring out where is the market and what kind of business I'm trying to build. So if you're building a lifestyle business, you could bootstrap it for the longest time. You don't need to raise funding. But if you're building a market, a business targeting maybe tens of billions of dollars, then there is a chance that other people are also thinking about the same idea, and so you will have competition, and so maybe you can get a lead by raising capital. The other part about the business, which is extremely critical, especially on the internet, is people. I cannot emphasize it enough that early employees, or the first 10, first 20, first 30, 40 employees, or the first 200 employees, depending on the scale of the business you are creating, are the key to success. Those are the only entities which make a difference between one company and another. As a startup, you can do things differently, you can do things faster, you can do things more efficiently, you can do things more cheaply, but you can do all of these only if you have the right people, who will help you in converting this vision into reality.